In this episode, we discuss the role of faith when worshiping one's God. Welcome to the third season of the Bottom Turtle Podcast. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon Ray, and we're joined by our co-host Oyani Onamiya. How you doing, Oyani?
I'm doing okay, man. Welcome to what is it? Season 3 now. This is good.
It's unbelievable, man. It's unbelievable because it's been over has it been like 9 months or something? It's been a long ass time.
Life was doing this thing. And, just had to roll with it. But yeah, we're back, and it feels nice. I think I'm excited for this season more because we can start to, really engage more with some of the concepts that we have, been talking about, and some of the world building that we've done in the past 2 seasons. So it's great.
What's funny about that is I think that this season's going to be. All right, here's my guess on what the vibe of the season's going to be. Okay. I think it's going to be one. It's time to start feeding data into our model. We spent 2 seasons building the model. Now we start feeding it data and have it start spitting out interpretations. So now we can actually start talking on topical things like what's going on in the world. Maybe we'll touch on some political topics and things like that. Of course, we're going to touch on those in a way that isn't inflammatory or putting more toxic crap into, like, it's more of like, let's disentangle some of the conversations that are happening out in the world so that we can make more sense of them. So that's one thing is it's going to have more of a topical vibe filtered through the Bottom Turtle language. Another aspect is since this hiatus, I have spent a crap ton of time studying Buddhism and the Bible.
Did say that. So it'll be interesting to see how that starts to influence some of what we talk about. So I'm excited to learn more. I don't know too much about Buddhism for sure. Christianity, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like from your perspective. And just so we're clear, I personally don't identify as Christian, at least not anymore anyway. So I don't know if that's something you identify as now.
I think I do. Yeah, okay, not that I think I do. It's actually funny. So in this last time, I've been spending a lot of time with 2 of my friends, and one of them is, I think he would be loosely call himself a Southern Baptist. I've mentioned him before in the podcast, and then the other one is Mormon. Okay, and so they're both very Christian guys, and so I've been spending a lot of time talking with them, and I've been studying the Bible more specifically with my friend Nathan, And so this topic about whether or not I'm Christian has been brought up, and I've talked about it with both of them. And it's kind of weird because part of it is undeniable that I'm Christian. Okay. And only in the fact that how I was raised. Like, honestly, one time Eunice asked me, and of course she was just kind of joking, but she asked me, she says, "Why are you so awesome?" And that was just her saying, "I love you. I'm glad you're my husband. I love you." But, at that cheeky question, like me being who I am, I'm like, well, let me think about that. Let me take that seriously. And of course, when you're going to think about that, you're going to go to the root. And the root is being raised by my parents. Okay. And then I go back and I start thinking about, okay, what was it like being raised by my parents? Well, we were very Christian. Like, we went to church. We went to church consistently. We had prayer meeting consistently. My mother's philosophy for how she raised her children was explicitly Christian. Okay. So it's like I'm being fed this spirit, and I don't have a choice. And it really is the foundation of a lot of who I am and why I am that way. And it's also the first world that I was given to explore in my mind. So when I look back as a kid and I think about sitting in prayer meeting and listening to my parents read the Bible, and I'm thinking about the ideas of Holy Spirits and Jesus and God, like, as a kid, that's forming a reality in my mind. And I'm starting to explore there. And you kind of course, when you're given that as a kid, you just live in that world. You don't even question it. You just accept it and you live there. You try, And not only that, but it's not even like at some point in time I was like, F religion, I hate Jesus, and I had like some sort of huge rebellion due to my hatred of religion. all of my religious experiences growing up were fine. Like I have no negative experiences with religion growing up, so I never had a reason to like hate it. and my leaving it in the first place was just more like I want to explore more ideas. It wasn't even, it wasn't even anything like that.
I feel like for me, it's different because I definitely went through a phase where I, had a huge problem with it. And it's probably like you said, my experience was a little different because I got to experience both the, good parts of Christianity and religion and see some of like the more, sinister part, and be, in it enough to have like firsthand knowledge about it. And so for me, I definitely went through that phase where it was like, oh, F this, blah, blah, blah. But, over time, as, I've grown older and I've started to really, explore, myself, become more self-aware, I've taken the time to go back and really like take everything apart, like everything that I've learned, and I've been able to kind of filter most of that information through a different lens now where it kind of makes sense. Like, I won't go as far as saying I identify as a Christian, at least, not anymore, but I do have a lot of respect for Christianity and a lot of these type religious beliefs.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I was talking to Reasonable Fideus, and I was telling him like, I feel like when I was a child, my parents told me there's this guy who is the Son of God and that he's a perfect being, and if you just follow him and be like him, then that's the way to like living a life in which you're taken care of and loved. And when I think about that, and I think about growing up, you have no clue. And this is one of the things that really makes it hard for me to disentangle Jesus from my identity. You have no clue how impactful it is to just imagine the idea of a perfect person. And then you're supposed to live up to that person, perfect person. So I'm given this thing by my parents. There is a perfect person, and you are supposed to live up to that person's standard. And then you look at the way, and then it's like, okay, there's an idea of an ideal. And then you start feeding it traits. So what traits do get fed to the perfect person in my world? Well, it depends on how my parents behave. It depends on what they punish me for and what they don't punish me for. It depends on how my grandparents, my siblings, my relatives, my aunts, my uncles, because they're all Christian, right? So I'm always in a Christian environment. I go to church, I'm in a Christian environment. So there's an ideal person, and then there's all of these traits that get placed on them on what it is to be that ideal person. And as a child, when you accept that as just fact because your parents gave it to you, you internalize that deeply. And so when I look at as an adult and I look back at how I am the way I am and how I've developed, that is just impossible to untangle. It's so core to who I am that it would be a lie almost to say that I'm not Christian.
That's interesting.
But at the same time, this is the aspect that Nathan posed to me, and you go into understand like do I accept something like the resurrection?
Okay.
Like, do I accept something like, he is the literal Son of God and that he's the son of the creator of the universe and that he was sent to earth and then died and resurrected. And then I'm like, oh, well, I can't, as a scientist and as a rational person, I can't really go there. And so then that's what really creates this conflict about me questioning my Christian identity.
Okay, so I think we probably need to take a few steps back and...
A few steps back, sorry.
Yeah, and talk about, like, what is a God? What is the idea of a God? What does that mean? Like, for me personally, when I, went through this period of, unraveling my relationship with Christianity and religion and God and whatnot, one of the things that I really held on to was this idea that, God, it became... Because, of course, I grew up Pentecostal, and we really take the Sky Daddy figure very seriously. Yeah. We take it literally. Yeah. And for the longest time, God represented this person, this being who was above, probably a, old white guy with a beard, someone that, had some aura of respect and power about him, I guess.
Yeah.
Visually, anyway. But with time, I started to see the idea. I started to see God as an idea, like something that you can look up to and aspire to be. So, a perfect example is kind of like back in the day when we played video games, and video games had cheat codes that you could go into and you could get into like God mode, for example.
Yeah.
And like God mode ideally is you become this character in the video game that is unstoppable. You have all of the weapons, you know all of the puzzles, you know all the trapdoors, all the tricks. You could do 15 flips and just imagine you're playing Mario. And God mode is just, you just hit the jump button and you just jump all through the whole game and just take all the coins as you jump. Yeah.
You have the star the entire time.
Yeah. Like you can't drop into the hole, none of that. You know where every hole is, you know how to time every jump precisely. And it's almost unbelievable to think that as, you know, human beings, we can achieve this level of godness
and vulnerability.
Yeah. But it's useful to, you know, have the idea of what is your God, essentially. You know, what is your God that you look up to and, you know, strive to be.
Ideal.
Yeah, as the ideal. And what traits are in there that you want to emulate or, you know, live your life by. You might never actually quite get to where you could just run through the whole game and all that, but you know, that's the goal, and you're like, you know, following that path, kind of.
Yeah. So I think that goes back to our last episode. So the last episode from our, you know, that we did in the season finale of season 2, where that was kind of where we left off. So we kind of left off with this idea of your God being something that you worship, and in doing so, you follow its rules, with the hope of embodying its spirit so that you can make decisions to live more in accordance with its will, and by doing so, being able to program the universe with respect to the God that you worship. And so you make decisions. So whether or not you make decisions, like which decisions you make affect which where you're at in the space of configurations, which then affects where you're at in the space of spirits you're embodying, which, you know, and so your God, this ideal, is kind of a North Star that you use to navigate when you're moving through the space of configuration, or the space of spirits, or the space of metaphors. And so we spent a lot of time exploring that as kind of the basis of God. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this episode is the idea of God as its relation to a higher power. And so one of the aspects of it that we kind of didn't discuss was the act of sacrificing to a higher power. And I think that's important to what you're saying, because once you have this idea of sacrificing to a higher power, you start seeing it in terms of relationship. So just a set of basis for what I mean by that. If you go back to our episode Liberals and Conservatives, we talk about that game Words for Friends. It's called Words for Friends. Words with Friends, yeah. And you brought up that example about Words with Friends. That's the company, right? They make a Scrabble game.
No, Words with Friends is the game. It's based on Scrabble, essentially.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure Scrabble is probably trademarked at this point, so they can't use that name.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So the point was, in that episode, you were saying that imagine you have two people who work for Words with Friends, and they're trying to play the game of creating a successful game that people play that makes money for the company. And so if one person is in the game and they're like a Scrabble purist, and they're like, no, we can't change any of the rules of Scrabble. This is what it should be. And then the other person comes along and is like, hey, well, remember the goal of the game is to like make it more fun or make it fun, so and to get more money, get more customers. And so when that person who doesn't want to change the rules goes, oh yeah, you're right, that's the higher goal. Now that that person knows the rules to the games, he can sacrifice some of his own desires and wants to the greater goal, and in that regard, orienting himself in what he's trying to accomplish or what spirits he's aligned with. And so this process of having a higher goal or a higher power that you're trying to navigate, that fixes what game you're trying to play, which then determines what you sacrifice for. And so this entire process of kind of being in relationship with your God or your ideal has this aspect of sacrifice. And and the way I like to think of it is I like to think of it in terms of the social contract. So think about what the social contract is, just like being in a society. The social contract is you give up some of your personal sovereignty to be part of the larger group or the larger whole. And so I think that that's another aspect of what it means for something to be a god, in that it has to do with your sacrifice to this ideal, or your sacrifice to that God. And in doing so, you're sacrificing parts of yourself to be in a better relationship with that thing. And so it's about your relationship with God.
And I think if you're not making sacrifices, I don't think you could say that is your God. Yeah. Like if you're not actively making these sacrifices towards this ideal, is it really your God? I mean, and I'm pretty sure we can have like numerous gods depending on, what our goal is. It doesn't have to be one unilateral thing. But what I'm saying is, like, if you're not sacrificing towards this process of trying to become this ideal, then you're probably not making the effort to become this ideal. Yeah. Sacrifice is like kind of like a part of it.
Yes. Oh, it's a huge part of it. And to your point of what you were saying earlier about playing God mode on a video game, and the idea of you're trying to get to the ideal, but you'll never get there. Well, just imagine if you're like trying to get to this ideal God is completely directly related to how much sacrifice you make.
Yes.
So then it's like you have an ideal and you're trying to maximize what you get out of it. And so to maximize what you get out of it, you sacrifice to it. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, something that's really your God, you should be willing to sacrifice. Like basically, like if you're like hardcore worshiping your God, you sacrifice everything to it.
Yes.
Everything to it.
Whatever that God might be, from Christianity, God, to heroin. Yeah. Same thing.
Well, I mean, the thing about this, so the thing about something like heroin is I don't even know if if I could say that's in the same category, because when you do that, you're kind of just like, you're not acting consciously. You have this signal, like you were saying before, like, you get these signals like eat or shit or something like that. And then imagine that every time you got the signal, you just accepted the signal. But so you're not, so in that regard, you're not actually, you're just kind of being pulled along by whatever signals and desires that come along. You're not really sacrificing. You're just kind of floating in the wind at that point.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of sacrifice that has to happen though, because when I think about something like heroin, for example, which, I'm using as an example for like the complete opposite of, a God that's trying to lead you to prosperity or whatever. Yeah. So, this God in this sense is you getting to that point of euphoria or highness, quote unquote, that heroin gives you. And trust and believe you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things if you keep chasing that. Your job, your relationships, your family. It sacrifice, sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to lead to something positive. You could be sacrificing your own life, your health for this God.
Part of, I guess one of the reasons why I have a little bit of pushback, or why I'm having trouble just kind of like what I guess with the thing that's in the back of my mind that's telling me that there might be something wrong with this, is I think that this idea of your God and what you worship is attached to your conscious awareness. And it's because the idea is, so when I'm thinking of conscious awareness, I remember watching a video a while back, and it was about the difference in humans and apes for delayed gratification. So it's the idea of delayed gratification. Okay. Sacrificing a gratification in the moment for something better in the future. And I think that your ability to do that is intimately tied to the idea of consciousness. Because otherwise, if whenever you get some sort of signal that tells you to get some gratification in the moment, you just accept it. You can't fight it off and delay it or anything like that. Then you're just being kind of pulled through the wind, by your whims, and you're not really acting in a conscious way. And I think that the idea of having a delayed gratification, and that being the sacrifice so that you can be in alignment with a God, that's tied to your conscious awareness. And for some reason, just like the idea of being pulled by your addiction, it's like, yeah, you're sacrificing stuff, but it's almost like you're sacrificing in the sense that you're not activating your will. Like, you know what I mean? There's no delayed gratification process in that. It's just full blown immediate gratification.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Oh wait, can you lean forward?
Okay,
your mic. You sound quiet. You have to be your mic.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah,
it's better. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What is the relationship between God's worship and sacrifice? Like how do these three concepts fit in to each other? Because I'm almost imagining that all three things are so interconnected to where it's like, if this is your God, you have to be sacrificing for it, and there has to be some worship of it.
Yeah, I think okay. So I think that act of sacrifice is something like worship. So if you listen back to our last episode, we were trying to connect the idea of worship, with the idea of love.
Okay.
So love is worship, and the way that we were establishing that it was in two ways. One, the idea of being in a relationship, and two, the idea of making something stable. So if you're in a relationship with something, that relationship exists as a configuration in the universe. Like if you're married, then you have a relationship with your wife, and then say you do something that betrays her, and then suddenly that's like a scar, and you can't really, and so the relationship's gonna change in a way that if you can't simply go back to the way it was before. And so, in that regard, that state of the universe prior to the scar and after the scar, those are two different configurations of the universe. Okay. And so, if there is a moment in which you are faced with a choice about whether or not you're going to make a decision that causes a scar, you sacrifice whatever you get out of what you do that causes the scar. You sacrifice that to maintain the state of the relationship prior to the scar having occurred. And so, that would be a loving act, because it's an act where you know whether or not what you're doing is good or bad because you're in a relationship with something. You know for a fact that if I do this, then this will make this relationship go from this state to that state. So you know you're in a relationship with something. And so from there you can orient whether or not what you're doing is good or bad. And then what you do affects whether or not that relationship continues to exist or not. And so I think that when you tie the idea of relationship with the idea of preservation, then you can see where the sacrifice comes into this idea of worship, I think. And so now when you're thinking about your relationship with your God, you have a relationship with your God, and you know that if you don't act in accordance with that God, then you're going to change your configuration to a state that's not in accordance with the will of that God, and you're either going to feel guilty, or you're just going to keep on acting in a certain way until you just completely drift away from your God completely.
But I feel like when you talk about God, you seem to only be seeing it from a positive perspective, which is actually pretty interesting. Because for me, the concept of God is so personal to where a lot of people who claim to be Christians or whatever religion they are, I don't know that too many of them have actually sat down to say, what is my God? What are my gods? And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that leads you to the promised land. A God, it could be a false idol. For example, people worship like those back in the day, and Christians were like, oh, that's a false God. But it was still a God. But Christians will point at it and say, that's a false God, because according to, whatever promised land they were going, based off of, whatever ideals they were channeling to get to this God mode, quote unquote, they believed that these people who worship this false god, this idols or whatever, their route or chasing their ideals was going to lead them astray. But regardless, though, I think when we talk about the concept of God, for one, you can have more than one gods that you worship based off of, different levels of worship. But at the same time, not all gods have to be positive. Some gods you could be worshiping, you could be sacrificing, you could be trying to preserve your relationship with heroin by making sure you take more heroin. Because when you don't take heroin anymore, you know how you feel and you don't want to be in that place anymore. So that is your God. But does it lead you to a positive place? I don't know.
Well, I guess something about the heroin. So to your point,
okay,
I think that you can worship evil gods. Yeah. So like if it is the case that you just really love torturing animals, and you're just like,
you want to be the best animal torturer ever.
Torturer on the planet. Yeah, I feel like, and then also you have to make decisions so that you have to delay gratification so you can live in a life in accordance with your animal torture god. I suppose that makes sense. I guess my biggest I think my biggest issue with the heroin example, it's not necessarily whether or not something's good or bad, because I think to your point, you can worship something that's bad, and if it's along with your ideal, you want to be
that's fine. Live your life.
You want to be the ideal terrible person, then
Sure, yeah.
But there's just something about the heroin example that just seems like it doesn't fall in accordance. It's almost like you're a slave to something, and it's not. And of course, I can imagine someone listening to this and thinking about God. It's like, well, you're a slave to whatever God you're following the rules. I mean, I can imagine someone saying that, but I don't know. Maybe we have to like come back and revisit this. I don't want to spend too much of the episode on this, but
but I think what I was trying to get at is, I want this idea of good and bad to be taken completely out of the window. I think it should just be ideals. What are your ideals? What are you trying to become? What is, the thing that you look up to and you're like, man, yeah, that's where I want to be. And it doesn't necessarily have to be positive. It doesn't have to be great. It just you just have to be aware of when you start to make something your God and how you're sacrificing for it, your relationship with it, how you're worshiping with how you're worshiping it, how you're valuing it, all of that stuff. Once you start to see all of the things that you place your value and your relationships and you sacrifice for, you can start to see, what is my God. And sometimes it's probably not even a positive thing or leading you to a positive place anyway.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I think might be good to interject here.
Okay.
It's the idea of false gods, as you mentioned. Okay. And I think that in the example you gave false god in the sense that if there's someone who believes that their God is the only God, then any God that's not their God is a false God. You know what I mean? Like that's one way of looking at it. But another way going back to your idea of centralizing the idea of God around ideals, I think that a false God in that context is one that does not provide what it promises. So it's one where it's like, okay, I've joined some religion.
Okay.
And they say that this God right here is the ideal that orients you in this direction. Okay. And then you based on faith, you jump into that world and you trust the God based on faith. You trust it, you follow it, and it doesn't lead you to over there. It leads you to somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Okay, this is true.
In that regard, that thing is a deceiver. It doesn't do what it says it's going to do. It doesn't take you where it says it's going to take you. Like, you have an intention of going over here and it's taking you in the opposite direction. And so in that way, I think that would be one way which I would think of the idea of false gods, independent of someone just claiming they have the one true God. And if you don't believe in that, then you're wrong.
Okay.
More in the idea of whether or not the thing you worship is a deceiver,
or whether or not it's leading you to the ideal it promises. It's promised land. The promised land doesn't have to have roses or daffodils or whatever, but
that's the thing. They say that they're leading you to the promised land with roses and daffodils, but they're leading you down a land of suffering and delusion and all types of other nonsense.
Because imagine someone, for example, who, you say you get into a relationship or you get married and suddenly you get a promotion at work and you're coming home late, You are working on the weekends. You work till like midnight. You have to wake up. And eventually you're sacrificing everything for the job.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, has your job become your God, or is that a whole different thing from what you see gods as? Because to me, and this might not be right, it's always, what do you worship? And like we said, is how much
what do you want to sacrifice?
Yeah. What do you worship? What do you sacrifice? What is your relationship with this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you how much are you giving up for this thing? Because I think that in the end, that's kind of what makes a God, is how much are you giving up for it?
Okay, so this is a really good, so yeah, how much are you giving up for it?
Yeah.
So this goes back to one of the conversations I was having with Nathan. And it comes to the idea of going back to this idea of sacrifice.
Okay.
Now, the thing was I was so in exploring these ideas, like so earlier in this episode, I was mentioning that when I grew up, when I was young, my parents told me there's this ideal person who's the son of God, and that if you worship him, he'll take care of you, and he's the ideal. And so as I got older and I started reading the Bible again, I started thinking, man, it seems like they weren't lying to me. As I read this Bible, man, Jesus really is like, like it seems as though they were telling me the truth. Like he really does. He tells you how to avoid being deceived, like whether or not how to avoid false gods, like whether or not you're being deceived. He makes very clear statements about what it means to love other people. Like as I read him, I'm like, man, I think I agree with all of this stuff. Like a lot of it seems very it seems like truly a spirit of love and truth that I'm reading from this book. And so as I started exploring more, like deepening my relationship, I got challenged by Nathan with this idea of like, well, do you believe in the resurrection? I'm like, well, as a scientist and as a rational person, I can't go that far. So I remember sitting one day, I was going to have a meeting with Nathan, and I was imagining what it would be like if I made that leap and was like, nope, I take everything full sail. Like I completely accept the idea that he's the son of God, the creator of the universe, and that the resurrection occurred and everything is exactly true and literal. And I thought about what it would be like what would I be after making that leap? And I would not be the same person. Basically, what I knew would happen, what I knew I was doing if I were to do that, is I'd be sacrificing that part of my mind that is kind of that very deeply rational, like scientific minded thing. There would have to be some degree to which I sacrifice that part of me.
And that is a lot. So that is a huge sacrifice.
It's a huge, exactly. Yeah. It's a huge sacrifice. And it would essentially be the death of me as I am. And I think that, and that was when I came to realize the purpose of the baptism ritual. The whole point is that you are sacrificing who you are. You're sacrificing a part of yourself, and not a small part of yourself, a huge part of yourself, so that you can have a relationship with God through Christ. And the idea is that Christ is supposed to, like, that process is a purification process where you're purified through Christ and then reborn in a relationship with God through Christ. That's like the whole point. And something my friend Andy pointed out, because he also thinks about Christianity and Christ. He was pointing out like the idea of Jesus shouldn't, like, once you become a Christian and you start acting and you accept Jesus as your God, once you do that, it shouldn't be something like, well, life is normal, nothing has really changed. It should be a big shift. It should be something big. Yeah. It's not a minor thing. And so that, to me, was me looking at it and saying, okay, I identify as Christian to some degree. And to some degree, it would just be nonsensical for me not to identify as Christian. But at the same time, I'm not able to make that leap of faith. And because of that, whatever benefit I think that I would get from identifying as Christian or from Christ, there's a cap on it. There's an upper bound how much I get out of it, because I'm not fully in that world because I haven't accepted those things. And when I look at people like Reasonable Fideus and I look at Nathan, they're full blown in there. I told them, like, it's clear that I'm on one side of the fence and you're on the other side of the fence. Like, you're fully in that world, like completely in there. And to some degree, I actually think what they've done is admirable. Well, not, I do think it's admirable because they're willing to make that sacrifice and make that leap and kind of just trust that when they go into that world, Jesus is who he says he is. He's the spirit of love and truth, and that he will take care of them. They just believe it on faith, and that's how they get into that world, is through faith. They don't really, and it's that level of lack of faith that I know that I have that kind of like,
So I was thinking, I'm like, okay, so is your God, is the level of sacrifice that you're willing to make, is that what determines what it is? Like, how huge? Because like you said, for you to, cross over to the other side, you'll have to be sacrificing a huge, huge part of who you are.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And I wonder if, that level of sacrifice is what's needed for you to say, you know what, yeah, this is, my God now. Like, you have to be willing to give up a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's something interesting to what you just said. Like, what level? Like, how big?
Yeah.
Like, how much is this thing my God based off of my level of sacrifice? Yeah. So my conclusion is this: I think that I'm Christian in the sense that of everything I've said so far on the podcast.
Okay.
But like, when you're looking at Jesus as a vector in the space of all spirits that point at my spirit, like if you look at all the things that I identify with, and you look at Jesus as like being Christian, look at Jesus as one of the basis vectors that you move along to say which direction I'm pointing in. My coefficient or how much I'm pointed in the Jesus direction is not the same amount as someone like Nathan or Reasonable Fideus.
Okay.
But at the same time, there are just rules of Christianity that I will not break. I worship them. They are my God.
Okay.
They create my world. I will not break them. And in that regard, it's just like I feel like it's unavoidable that I am Christian, but it's just like the size of my Jesus vector is smaller.
Okay.
And I sacrifice some of my Jesus vector to like the science rational vector. But one of the things that I've noticed with the system of like, so here's the craziest part about it, of why I'd even consider wanting to jump and be completely in the Jesus world. The reason why I'd want to do that is because I lack faith terribly.
Yeah.
As a rational person, like I if I'm being honest, I am a coward, and I know that I'm a coward.
Faith is huge. And faith is a big deal.
Faith is a big deal, and that's one thing. And that's one thing about the podcast. The reason why we have 2 seasons, over 20 hours of us just laying down the groundwork so no one can misunderstand what we're saying, is because I'm so afraid of someone not understanding what the hell I'm trying to say that I was like, because I remember even before you were saying stuff like, man, can we just go ahead and get into some deeper topics here? Like, why do we keep on, like, no, we got to do another episode where he's saying that spice, because I'm a coward. That's just what it is.
Yeah, because faith is a big deal. And I think, that's probably another, characteristic that, has to come into play when you are picking a God. Do you have faith in this thing? Faith that this thing will take you to where you want to be. Yeah. Do you have faith in this thing? Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have faith? Because here's the thing. So one thing that I've realized, discussing Christianity and just religion in general, I love the topic. It's just, I think it's beautiful. One of the things that I've noticed when I talk to a lot of people from different faiths, because mind you, while I'm talking to Christians, I'm also talking to my friend who was like a former Zen Buddhist and is a contemplative and is more in the Buddhist direction.
Okay.
And like I said, I've been studying Buddhist and Christ. I love Buddha and I love Christ. I love both of them. Like, I am certain that they are both purifying spirits. They are both spirits that purify. They get rid of delusion. They purify.
Yeah.
But what was I saying? one thing I've noticed when I'm talking to people about religious topics, like especially like, you know, about their faith, is that a lot of times when I think about atheists, they look at something like, oh, you believe in the resurrection and you believe he's the actual son of the God of the creator universe. Ha, that's so unreasonable and stupid. You're an idiot for believing that. But what I've noticed is that to me is like the entrance. That's the entrance into the world. That's the entrance to the reality. So what I do when I come across the entrance, I'm like, oh, I've stepped across the threshold. I've seen the entrance, but it doesn't mean that everything inside the world is wrong and stupid and terrible.
Which is exactly
it's just an entrance.
What I had to do. Yeah, I had to get through that too.
But the thing is, when I say it's just an entrance, I want to say that it's just an entrance in the sense of that's how you pay the cost to get into the world. But it's not just an entrance. Because for my Mormon friend and for Nathan, it is the thing that allows them to have the relationship with God and to have full faith, and it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, for me, as someone who's just trying to understand the truth and reality and trying to cobble together some sort of understanding for myself, when I come across that faith threshold, I don't use it. It doesn't completely mean that everything my friend's about to tell me is just nonsense. No, it's like I have faith to some degree. I love them enough. I love them enough to listen to what they say and take it sincerely as I can.
Especially when these are people who actually believe these things. You know, they go through their day-to-day life, you know, living in here. And that's kind of what's so interesting about where we are right now is people don't understand, like, you could live in your own reality and it has depth and meaning. So when someone comes to you, and, you know, again, this is something that I had to go through myself when I was, you know, questioning my relationship with Christianity and whatnot, is when I talk to a Christian and I interact with their ideas and their belief system, like you said, when it starts to get to that threshold of, you know, okay, the resurrection and faith and all that, like, perfect example will be my sister, my older sister. She is probably one of the more religious, you know, Christian members of my family. And so sometimes she'll post, you know, some things online or in the group chat or whatever. And these are like, you know, Christian verses and, you know, her faith-based, you know, thought processes and things like that. I've gotten to a place where I could just sincerely just connect to it and kind of just understand, like, this is this person's reality. Yeah, like, you know, they paid the cost to live here. They sacrifice on a daily basis to live here. You know, so who am I to say, you know, my reality makes more sense? But that's not to say that all that's in there is complete trash. No, it's not. There's so much value in there.
And this is the thing that's funny about it. Here's what I find interesting about it. Is what it becomes is this thing where you sacrifice whatever thing that's telling you, oh, does this make sense or this does not make sense? You sacrifice that, and through that you're trusting that the God of the realm that you worship will catch you. Yeah. You're hoping it will catch you. And this is actually an image that Reasonable Fideus has put in my head. I'm going to ask him if he doesn't mind if I use his real name. The only reason why I use his online name is I've just never asked him if he's okay if I use his real name. But that's the metaphor he uses. It's like a child jumping off of something and having a parent catch them. And the thing is, it's like that process, that leap of faith, like when you jump into your parent's arm. I am confident. I am confident that if you take the words of Jesus sincerely, and you make that leap of faith, he will catch you. Yeah. I am convinced of that. And in that regard, I do believe that when he says he's a spirit of truth and he's a spirit of love and he says those things, I truly believe that. I truly believe that he is that spirit. He is a purifying spirit. I believe that. And so And so that barrier into it is one of the things. But one of the things that I have to then grapple with is the idea is like, okay, if you don't think that the resurrection is real, then wouldn't that mean this whole thing is based on a lie? And if it is, then how do you justify it's the spirit of truth and everything if it seems to be built on a lie? And my response to that is literally, after thinking about it for so much time, is I don't give a fuck. Okay. That's my response. And the reason why my response is that is because when I think about how I even become, how I even am who I am in this way, to even think the way that I do and take this stuff seriously, I always think back to my mom. And like I said in the last episode, we went to her church that her parents went to, and her grandparents, they went to that church. And so the lineage of my spiritual beliefs comes from my mom, on my mom's side. And when I talk to my mom about why she is Christian and why she believes in God and all this stuff, you know what her response is every time? When she was a young girl, she was raised by her grandparents. And when she was with her grandparents, everything felt safe, and she felt like she was being taken care of. It's like there was a presence that took care of her, and she felt safe. And so that spirit, that thing that made her feel safe, that is the thing that she wants to take care of her kids. Okay. And so she raised us with that intention. So here's the thing. My mom, without a doubt, loves me. There's no doubt about that. And she passed this on to me essentially because she loved her grandparents. They loved her, and she's just passing that love along. And so when I'm thinking about whether or not I should take my mother's spiritual and religious beliefs seriously, it's like, who am I to ask my mother for a better answer than I love you? And so when it comes down to that barrier about whether or not that, I just don't care, man. Like, if you knew the depths to which I do not care, it's like, whatever. I'm still going to, I read the Bible. I take Jesus' word sincerely, and I feel the love coming directly back at me. I do not care. And so I think that that's my faith. Like, that's the faith that I'm using right there. It's not the same degree as Nathan, but it got me into the world, and I get something out of it. You know what I mean?
And I think that it's useful to separate, and for someone like me, I think that that's probably my biggest struggle. Is a lot of my interaction with Christianity, has not always been positive.
Yeah.
And so it's really colored how I see, the religion in itself, but it's almost like the difference between a movement and a foundation. Kind of like how, you can have a movement that's worthwhile, but the foundation behind it is complete trash. By foundation, I mean like, the organization behind it, for example. So, the movement might be, the idea behind it. So the idea behind it, I think that it's useful to separate that from what it's become, like all of the other crap that just makes it seem like, oh, wow, this is not any good, which is what people like me, struggle with, to the point where I can think about it and go, okay, I want to lean into the idea that, these words are, loving, and this religion is love, and this, that, and the other. But at the same time, I've had like personal experiences with people who are supposedly, this is their God, this is who they're trying to, the ideal they're trying to get to, but it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that you have that kind of relationship with Christianity now, but for me, I don't think I do. I think I'm at the point where I respect it. I respect that there is so much value in the Bible itself, like the words, even just using it as a guidebook through life, you will be fine. You'll be fine. You're not gonna fall off a cliff or just completely be an asshole. No, you'll probably be okay. Yeah.
You'll probably be okay. Yeah. It's actually funny because, as a scientist, a lot of the people I spend my day-to-day life with are PhDs, scientists, engineers, you know what I mean, computer scientists, like, really, really highly educated people. And so whenever I meet someone who is a PhD and they're Christian and they take it seriously, those people are powerful, man. I'm telling you,
I really want to meet more people like that, though, and actually pick their brains.
They're powerful, man. And and not only that, but you can tell that it's like, you better be on your best behavior. Yeah. and by that I mean they have like a standard of being, and their faith in it is so rock solid, like it kind of like straightens you up just being around them.
You're right.
And and it's like I was saying, it's almost like I especially talking to my friend Nathan, it was a realization that, you know, back when I was going through my atheist phase, and you would look at someone who was Christian and they were smart, and you would think that they're smart despite the fact that they're Christian. But now I am certain that a lot of times they're smart because they are. Because that religion is very good at identifying what delusion is and directing you away from it.
Yep. And I think
this is what I like about Buddha too, because Buddha does the same thing. And not the same thing, I don't want to say the same thing and that it does identically the same thing, although, you know, that would be something we discuss later. But Buddha is also a purifying spirit that's very good at identifying delusion and steering you away from it.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I think if you take away a lot of the woo, like we say, from, you know, Christianity itself and, you know, the Bible and the religion, there's still a lot of meat there. A lot.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's something that I think I've kind of going back on, because before I would be like, you can just take out the woo and it won't matter. But the woo is kind of like the leap of faith.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you take that out, and that's for someone like me, for example, who I am not taking that leap of faith. I got to be honest, I'm just not. But when I take, and this was how I came to the place where I have, you know, so much respect for it, and I really resonate with some of the words that's in there, is when you take away all of the woo and all that stuff out of it, there's still a lot of meat there.
There's still a lot of meat there. Yeah, even still, yeah.
And that's just why you can't just toss it out and just say it's nonsense. No, it's not. There's still a lot of meat in there.
There's a lot of meat in there, yeah. Yeah, and I think that one of the things. So one of the reasons why I was able, so like when I told you about that story about me realizing what I would have to sacrifice to kind of like completely jump into that world and just like completely be on the other side of the fence,
to get the key, the passcode.
Yeah, to get all the mana, all the energy that comes from the realm of Christ.
Like, come on in.
The reason why I was able to comprehend what was going on, because I was reading the Bible when it happened. The reason why I was able to comprehend what was going on at the time is because of all of the time I spent with Buddha. So we spent a lot of time in this episode talking about Jesus, and I'm hoping to expound more on how Buddha has influenced my thinking.
All right.
But one thing about Buddha, and this is just something that I find funny. Do you know what Buddha asked you to sacrifice?
What?
Everything. All of it. Yeah. Every last bit of it. Sacrifice the whole thing. And the thing is Buddha is not telling you that you're going to get in a relationship with God at the end of it. The whole point, like I was reading this book called The Lotus and the Cross, where someone has a mock conversation between Buddha and Jesus to kind of like suss out the differences in their teachings. And one of the things that they said in that book was, Buddha, you're just obliterating relationships. And it's like, yes, that is what Buddha is doing. But the idea of why Buddha would have you do this and why this leads to enlightenment is that the idea is that for everything you attach to, that attachment fixes you in that state. Like, you're clinging to it. And because you're clinging to it, you're treating that perception as reality. And so remember how we were saying in the last episode that your relationship with your God, it gives you vision. It gives you sight. It's your interpretation machine. When X and Y because of Z, it's the Z. It's the thing that gives out an interpretation. But what's it interpreting? It's interpreting the degree of freedom soup.
Okay.
And so each relationship you have with a God is a different perspective. It is your vision of your reality. It is your worldview. And so the idea of Buddha is he's trying to get you to a point to where you have full capacity to have, like, you're not in any one world. Like we're saying, the entrance, you're not in any one world. Every time you obliterate a relationship, that frees you up to be like that's like getting out of that world, like stepping out of it. And so you're not treating that world as reality anymore. And you're just trying to obliterate all the worlds. And each time you step out, you have more. You're like expanding. You're expanding into the set of possible ways to interpret the degree of freedom soup. And so if you sacrifice all of them to where you have no identity and you cling to nothing, then you are just simply sitting in the space of infinite conscious capacity.
And again, this is the ideal.
That's what
this
Buddhism
is the idea. Yeah, I mean, will you be able to sacrifice everything? Probably not, but at least you understand that's the idea now.
But that's the whole point, is that they say that the legendary story of Buddha sitting under the tree, that he had reached nirvana, that he had reached this level of full lack of clinging and but the thing is the reason why this is important is because when I read that, when I was reading the Bible and I came to that realization that I would be making a sacrifice, that's when I realized that this process of enlightenment and sacrifice, because I knew that I was sacrificing a part of me so that I would, like what I would be doing is sacrificing a part of me to be in line with Jesus. But that process of sacrificing to be in alignment with something, that's exactly what Buddha is asking you to do. And so that's kind of the process of why I think currently the system of thought I have needs a faith component, because at the moment I need to be able to trust in this thing that I am valuing and worshiping, such that when it comes to a situation where there is no information to tell me whether one thing or the other, I can just take a leap of faith and trust that it'll take care of me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So right now, do you feel like you have faith in anything?
Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
So I've been wrestling with this faith component that needs to be added. Okay. And honestly, earlier I said I was a coward. I'm being a little harsh on myself. Even though I am a coward, I do step out and
step into the fire.
I don't do nothing. I step into the fire. Yeah. I do it, but I take smaller steps. I take smaller steps. And so part of actually this episode right here is I'm trying to actively trust in my God more.
Okay.
And I'm trying to not overthink things so much.
And I think that is the faith component in there. That is all the value of it. Yeah. I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep.
And that's why I'm talking so candidly in this episode. Like I'm sick. I'm so fucking tired of being worried about how people will take things.
Because that's pretty interesting though. Because without that, you might just be spinning your wheels because you don't have anything to trust that, you know what, because you can never have all the information you need.
Never.
No, if you keep playing that game, you play forever. But
just sit in one spot,
the faith component. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You can't get rid of that faith component. And so the thing that's interesting is that in Buddhism there is no faith. There is no faith. And actually, like, this is something I really want to talk about this more as the season goes on. Because there's so much of Buddhism that aligns actually with my research. I'm like when you listen to it, like the way that they broke down perception and things, like it's like a science, man. Like it's impressive. And the process of letting go is one one that's achieved through meditation. And so when you let go, like I don't know if anyone has ever
about this with my sister a few hours ago.
Oh, really?
Meditation, yeah. We just talked about it, and this is kind of what we're saying, like the process of just letting everything go and trusting that. Like for me, when I meditate, I do it usually when I'm having trouble sleeping. One of the things I try to remind myself is like the process of, imagine that, my mind is a train station, and there's all these trains coming by, and these trains are literal trains of thoughts. And for someone like me who's just always wanting to think about everything, I'm just hopping on one train and coming out and hopping on the next train. I'm in my bed trying to go to sleep, and I imagine that I'm at this train station and these trains are passing by and I just cannot get on them. I just have to wait until all the trains are gone and I'm just alone in that station and nothing else matters.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way of doing it, man. Yeah.
And I'm just alone in that train station and all the trains are just gone.
So let me ask you a question. When you start reducing the number of trains during this process, what's the feeling? Like, say a train disappears, you got rid of one and you were successful and you let go and a train disappeared. What do you feel when you do that?
Oh yeah, you feel relief. You feel, I usually just feel, because what I'm trying to achieve most times is I'm trying to not think about these things. These things are still there. Like all of these ideas and thoughts are still there, but I'm just trying not to get on that train. So they could just go on, and I'm just there like, yes, that's gone. So it's almost like you have all these layers of clothing and you're just taking a shirt off and just taking it off until you're just floating, all by yourself.
Yeah. Because one of the things that I've learned about this letting go process is, to me, like I can literally feel it. It's like you can actually feel something inside of you. It's like clinging and holding on like a ball. And then when you actually successfully let it go, you can literally feel it. Like you feel freer. You feel, it's almost like you can breathe. Like, and it's like you're getting something off your chest.
For me, I think I feel myself more. Like I can almost feel like I could feel the blood rushing in my veins. I'm with myself. I am one with myself.
Yes. Yeah, that's the Buddhist process.
That's all it
but
is.
The thing is that in both cases, whether or not you are doing the Jesus route or whatever God you worship, or you're doing the Buddha route, there is a process of letting go.
Yeah.
And that process, and so going back to our Matrix episode, and Neo's trying to move optically through the Matrix, and he's trying to get to his God mode, like he's literally trying to get to God mode at the end, right?
Yep.
So the whole point in that entire thing is Morpheus is trying to tell him that the more you allow your prior conditioning to control what you think reality is, the more it actually does control what you think reality is, and the more you're constrained. And so quit trying to hit me and hit me. Yeah. Believe that you can hit me. And this idea of conditioning, this idea of conditioning preventing you from kind of having access to this freer state of being, that is what Buddha is trying to like teach you to let go of. And just with one last Buddha lesson. One of the things about Buddhism is there's this process called there's like the first teachings of Buddha are something called the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths start off with the truth of suffering, or dukkha. And the truth of suffering isn't, I think it's a more nuanced idea than just suffering. It's like the feeling of uncomfortableness, the feeling of you're not comfortable in your skin, the feeling of I need to be doing this, or I need to be doing that. And you're just kind of like, I'm not, you're not relaxed, you're not comfortable. That state of suffering exists. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is the idea of craving. And so the suffering is caused by the craving. So that's the second noble truth. The third noble truth is that there is a way to get rid of the craving. So it's the cessation of craving. So there's a way to get rid of the craving. And the fourth noble truth is the noble eightfold path, which is the path to getting rid, which is the path for the cessation, or the removal of craving.
Okay.
And then that removal of craving gets rid of the suffering.
Okay.
And so this process is called like turning the Dharma wheel, and I've been listening to a lot of MC Owen's Lotus Underground, and I've actually been listening to it in a way where I study it. Like I don't listen to just one episode and go, oh, that was a cool show. I go back, I listen to the episode over and over and over and study it like I'm studying a text. And this is actually something I want people who listen to this podcast to think of this podcast as. It's not a show. It's not something that you just listen to it once and go, oh, do. It's something to where it's like, I can guarantee anyone who listens to this show regularly that if you go back and just pick a random episode and listen to it, it will speak to you more clearly now that you've gone through it. And so this is kind of what I've been doing. I've been studying Buddhism through this podcast and through other things. And so this idea of the Dharma, it's like, basically what I've come to realize is that this show, the Bottom Turtle Podcast, is my Dharma and our Dharma collectively. And Dharma can be understood as truth, not only in the way that this is true, but it can be understood as like, this is my system of truth. This is my worldview. And so the teachings of Buddha, the Dharma, this idea of his first teaching is called turning the Dharma wheel, because he's trying to like get you into his world. And so this idea of the Four Noble Truths, though, this idea of clinging and all of this, like this Buddha's trying to like teach you how to stop suffering by stop craving, but that craving comes with an identification of self. And that's where it comes from. Like, is this going to harm myself? I want to be in this state or that state. And it's this idea of self that is that is associated with clinging, which is causing the suffering.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've never actually paid too much attention to really dig deep into Buddhism, but maybe I should do that now. Man. It sounds fascinating, especially beautiful. Just starting to understand, like, the entire idea is just letting go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and which is something that I definitely struggle with. Is just letting go, and like you said, man, that's the one thing that's really hit me in this episode is the faith component. Like, it has to be there. It has to be there, man. Yeah.
Trust me, man. I know.
It has to be there. That's because, and this is so fascinating because I have had this conversation about faith specifically with Christians a lot, and they can't seem to just make sense of it. Yeah, all of them just cannot seem to make sense of it. All the ones I've spoken to, anyway, it's just like some thing somewhere that it's just there. But talking to you through this now, I'm starting to get a better understanding of what that means. I'm going to actually take my time to reevaluate my relationship with faith now, because, like you said, the faith component has to be there.
It's not a joke, and not only that, but if the faith component is what makes it so Neo can be the one at the end of the Matrix, man. Like, you want to get to that point.
You cannot get to the ideal without faith.
Yes, exactly.
That's brilliant.
You gotta let go, man. You gotta let go.
That is brilliant.
And the thing is so the thing is if you filter, like, one thing that I like is that when I listen to the Buddhism, it's like having our Dharma interact, where the Dharma of the Bottom Turtle podcast is is talking to the Dharma of Buddha. Yeah. Like, just take something like the like one of the main ideas of Buddhism is the idea of impermanence, because the idea is that the selves that you're clinging to are impermanent. And so when you're thinking of it in terms of how we have defined spirit in our podcast, it makes perfect sense, because the idea of impermanence is something like, okay, I'm Shannon. I say that I'm Shannon, right? But whenever I go from one thought to another thought, those are two different configurations. Like, I've gone from one configuration to the next. Did the Shannon that had the thought before die and a new one was born? You know what I mean? And then as I start to drift from one state of being or one set of rules that I'm following, or one configuration to the next, it's Shannon dying that entire time. And there's to some degree to which you can think, okay, when I go from one thought to another, it is one Shannon to a different Shannon. It's one Shannon going to a different Shannon. But when you start thinking of the idea that you're always in a constant state of fluctuation, even while you're listening to this podcast, even when you're just sitting down by yourself, you're always in some sort of state of fluctuation. And each one of those fluctuations could be a self that you identify with. It's a matter of looking at the self at a very tiny granular scale, as opposed to looking at yourself from a more macro far back scale. When you start looking at it from a very granular scale, you start realizing that you're fluctuating in and out of existence all the time.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. This is good. This is good. I'm gonna go back and really think about it. But I think.
No, man. I've been trying to not give a fuck more lately, man. I just care less.
That's good. The faith component has to be there. Fuck yeah. All right. I like it.
All right. Well, I think that was a good start to the new season.
Yeah. I'm excited about the season. I'm hoping that we can talk more about some of the things that we just talk about, on a regular day, and also pay more attention to, also try to build a community around some of these ideas now and interact more with people who listen to the podcast. We need to, do our thing where we watch like movies and we talk about it, and try to interpret it using some of the languages that we've developed.
One thing I want to do, I don't know if we're going to be able to do it this season, but we should. I want to do it this season. I want to give a review of Devs.
Okay, we should do that. Yeah. We should do that. I was also playing around with a couple of ideas about how we want to structure the season going forward, but I haven't fully formed them out in my head yet. But
yeah, man,
when I do, I'll run them by you. I think I want us to. want us to really like flesh it out in such a way that we could start to like build a community. But I haven't just thought about the best way to go about it just yet.
We just need, like, honestly, we just need to get more people to interact.
And that's the thing. We have to find a way. Engage. Yeah, we have to find a way to get them to engage. And I don't think that the podcast format where it's like, oh, we put out the episode, go listen to it, is something that we should rely on solely. I feel like the podcast should be kind of like church on Sunday, and then on the day, no, here's where I'm going. So the podcast should be like church on Sunday, like, oh yeah, guys, we go to church every Sunday and this is what we do. But like from, Monday through to Saturday, we should be living the Bottom Turtle podcast life, kind of like how when you get out of church, you don't stop your Christianity, you still go about and just, do Christian things. So I want us to still do Bottom Turtle podcast things aside from the podcast. If that does that make sense?
Are you talking about you want you and I specifically to keep living the Bottom Turtle podcast life, in that we're still engaging with the episodes we put out as opposed to just putting out an episode and thinking we're done for the week?
Yeah, but we put out the episode, but like engaging with people on these ideas. So like as a Christian, for example, you're not only just engaging with other Christians, you're going about in your day to day and you're interacting with people, but you're filtering that interaction with your Christian lens or wherever you're going, and people, oh yeah, that's that Christian guy. Oh yes, that's that Christian guy. So I'm wondering, like, how can we incorporate that into what we're doing to where we could, organically connect with people about some of our ideas, aside from the episodes itself.
I think it'd just be as simple as, like, putting out more content, being more active on Instagram, being more active on YouTube and things like that.
Because the thing is, I feel like one thing we should leverage on is we should start to leverage on the people that we know and get them involved in things.
Yeah. Oh, that's part of it. Like, that's why I want to have more people, people interviewed.
Yeah.
Because I want to have more people interviewed, because when you bring someone outside of the podcast, they're going to start feeding in their data and their thoughts and their ideas. It's going to get filtered through the language. And the whole point is this language is, I'm hoping that when I say it gets filtered through the language, it's an understanding that it's like, the language is designed to try to understand what people are saying. Like, it's not trying to dominate people. It really wants it, like, we really want things to be clear so that people can communicate at a higher precision, in a more sincere and loving way. Yep. And that's one thing that, like, when I think about being sincere and loving, I think about Christoph sending me that email. Like, when the whole reason why I spent all this time studying Buddhism is because one person listened to our podcast, sent us an email, was like, hey, you should check out this guy. And I was like, and like, you could get that email and be like, yeah, I'll check it out, and then just kind of like not do it. Or you can be like, this person seems to think that this is something interesting and significant. I'm going to take it sincerely. I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to actively, like, try to get something out of it. And it has changed my life significantly. And that's the level of sincerity that I want people to just interact with, just like if it is the case that you have anything you want to know, or you have an idea, or you have something you want to share, email it to us. And I can guarantee you we will respond. Like, like, you can actively participate in the show. You can, and then once you get your ideas out there, other people might be an idea that someone else has had that didn't even think of it. Yeah, we are. Yeah. Because, like, the thing is, what I don't think people understand is that this show, like, people listen to it all over the world. Like, if you're listening to this show, you're listening to this show with people from Australia, from Austria, from all over the place. And so, I don't know, man. I just really want to interact sincerely with people.
Yeah. Should we do the
plugs?
The plugs?
Yeah, man. Yeah, let's do the plugs.
Let's see if I can do it in a minute and 17.
Yeah. Get it. You can do it, yo.
All right, guys. Well, I think that was a great way to open up the season and kind of wrap up stuff we talked about last season. I'm definitely going to go back and think about some of this, so we'll probably touch on it a little bit more during the episode. But like always, hit us up on Twitter, on Facebook, and we're on Reddit as well as the Bottom Turtle Podcast. And share,
if you want to contact us directly with the highest chance that we'll see it, email us at thebottomturtlepodcast@gmail.com.
Yep. Email us and share, like, and recommend this podcast, and give it a rating on the Apple Store or Google Store. And
yep.
Stay turtling, my friends. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.